Order, order. Paula Barker to move the motion.
Thank you, Ms McDonough, and it is a pleasure to serve under your chairship today. I should declare that my husband is chair of YMCA Together in Liverpool, which is a non-paid role, and I am also national patron of YMCA. I would also like to pay tribute to colleagues and friends from various organisations in the homelessness sector here today. We have representatives from New Horizons Youth Centre, we have Centrepoint and also DePaul. So thank you for the work that you do and thank you for being here today. For those colleagues who know me well, they know I have a very keen interest in all matters relating to homelessness. Hopefully, some would say a serious interest. I'm also very proud to be the co-chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Ending Homelessness and use my role to regularly raise awareness where and when I can. I am more than happy to be considered a broken record on homelessness, but given I care deeply about being a voice to those who may feel they have none, I will accept such a charge. And I know if I'm a nuisance to the Honourable Member for Kensington, who I have a lot of time for, as she well knows, and my very good friend, the Honourable Member for Weaver Vale, I will be playing my small part in moving the needle towards progress and change. Homeless is multifaceted. Different forms exist, from sofa surfing, rough sleeping, to those stuck in temporary accommodation, and so much more besides. Yesterday, we saw the latest stats released by the department that once again reveal the scale of the problem. Over 112,000 households and 145,000 children in temporary accommodation. Of course, there are different factors that cause homelessness. For example, poverty, trauma, the care leaver, the domestic abuse victim, the list goes on and on. And different demographics of people are affected in a multitude of ways, from women, young people, those who define as LGBTQ+, our veterans, prison leavers, and many more. The solutions to the homelessness emergency, therefore, must be multifaceted. And yes, we desperately need to build more homes for truly affordable and social rent, but so too must we properly fund our local authorities, reform the welfare system, and not in a way that we have seen announced this week. And essentially, we must tackle the underlying trauma the vast majority of people who find themselves homeless have experienced in some form or another. All of this will require all of government, not one part of it, to put it at front and centre. Anything less is simply not good enough. Amidst such an emergency, young people are often overlooked by the system, with growing concern that ever greater revenue constraints being placed on local government lead to young people and young adults getting a raw deal from a system already at breaking point. Young people that experience homelessness are overlooked, in my opinion, by government, the department, and yes, by members across this place. And whilst I do know that there is local elections tomorrow, Ms McDonough, I have to say that I am saddened that we don't see more members here today for this incredibly important debate. Now, I am reliably informed that this is the first time in nearly 40 years that such time has been dedicated to the specific issue of youth homelessness. The previous time, in 1985, was largely because the former member for Manchester Wythenshawe, the late Alfred Morris, latterly Lord Morris, took it upon himself to raise the matter with the Secretary of State for the Environment. I was reading through the Hansard entry and I despaired that this contribution and his spoken words used in 1985 could be said here today in 2024. The former member for Manchester Wythenshawe spoke of, and I quote, "No information available on the numbers of homeless adolescents and young people in London and the other major conurbations." He also went on to talk at the lack of cross-departmental working to tackle the problem. And again, I quote, "The present piecemeal approach to the problem of homelessness among young people is hampering other valuable work in this sector. The DHSS, the Department of Education and Science, the Department of the Environment, the Home Office and local authorities are all involved in different but not very clearly differentiated aspects of the problem. It's staggering to think, 40 years later, how little overall progress has been made. Even where it has, like for example under the last Labour government, it has surely been eroded since. We still do not truly know how many young adults find themselves homeless. The data collected by the department could be so much better and so much more far-reaching. Given we are almost certain to be having a general election at some point in 2024, what I put to the government today in respect to demands, I truly hope that my frontbench opposition colleagues will also give consideration to. Collecting better data on young adults between the ages of 16 and 24 will not alarm any fiscal hawk at the Treasury. It is good policy and can be achieved very simply by making amendments to the Homelessness Reduction Act. As it is, we rely on the likes of Centrepoint, the National Youth Homeless Charity, who through their data bank work have estimated that nearly 136,000 young people approach their local council as homeless in 2022-23, many of whom were not even close to getting formally assessed. Despite Centrepoint's numbers being much larger than that of the departments, it should be noted that this is a small c conservative estimate that will not include thousands of young people classified as the hidden homeless. Those young people sofa surfing, for instance, and those who have not approached their local council in any way. To obtain such information for England, Centrepoint had to FOI every local authority in the country. That is absolutely ridiculous and it is shameful. How can government properly begin to solve the problem if you do not truly understand the scale of it? That is why charities like Centrepoint, teaming up with the likes of the Albert Kennedy Trust, the YMCA and the fantastic New Horizon Youth Centre, who do so much to help young people in London, alongside 100 youth organisations, are calling for a national youth homelessness strategy, a plan for the 136,000. Back in March, campaigners calling for a plan for the 136,000 homeless young people garnered over 15,000 signatures on a UK government petition. As they rightly say in their petition, no one is talking about this and there is no specific national plan to tackle youth homelessness. So, Minister, I would like to ask you to please refrain from tossing out the usual spiel about how much money the department is throwing at homelessness, may I add with little success, and instead commit today to start putting together a far-reaching and ambitious national youth homelessness strategy this side of the election, a plan for the 136,000. And as Alfred Morris highlighted in 1985, departments did not work with each other then, and they still do not today. Those experiencing homelessness, not least our young people, are always the ones who bear the brunt of Whitehall working in their traditional silos. Despite a valiant effort by the Honourable Member for Walsall North when he was a minister to at least secure some cross-departmental buy-in for the rough sleeping strategy, this government has shown no real vision in operating a cross-departmental working that a national youth homelessness strategy would rely on. Young people can experience homelessness for a plethora of reasons. Their experience, if they do, can be nothing short of desperate, and they are routinely, institutionally failed by the state. Many are not supported to transition into adulthood, and as such face unique barriers that can push them into homelessness. They may lack documents to evidence their homelessness, for example, written confirmation from their caregiver that they no longer are welcome in the home. And I've had the privilege of meeting with many young people at New Horizons in London. They told me they were not taken seriously or believed when they were presented as a council, and many local authorities failed to provide a proper homelessness assessment. Some young people are asked to return home when this may not be safe. Furthermore, these young people may not know what support is available beyond the family home they need to leave. So we need wholesale change. Young people deserve better. Our care leavers deserve better. The cost of youth homelessness to the Treasury is estimated to be £8.5 billion per year. On average, £27,347 for each young homeless person. Young people are vulnerable to homelessness due to unique barriers, including lack of visibility, reduced benefits, and a shortage of affordable youth-specific housing. I've just mentioned the poor outcomes for young people who approach their local council for support. In my own city of Liverpool, 1,849 young people approached the council as homeless, but only 332 were assessed by the local authority. A total of 1,743 people were not supported into housing after approaching Liverpool City Council. But I don't blame my council. I blame this government. Resources are scarce and they are stretched to absolute breaking point. Young people can often bear the brunt of local government austerity more than most. Liverpool City Council has seen temporary accommodation costs rise from £250,000 in 2019 to a projected £25 million by the end of this financial year, a rise of 10,000%. So, what could a national strategy achieve? A national cross-departmental youth homelessness strategy could look at extending priority need to all care leavers up to 25, as well as exempting them from council tax payments. A national strategy could work with DWP colleagues to look at taper rates for those young people in supported housing who are disincentivised from taking on extra hours at work and as a result can't move on to independent living. In hotspot areas, it could see councils adopting localised youth homelessness strategies with dedicated youth homelessness teams. And a national strategy could also look at repurposing a small part of the single-person accommodation programme to include youth-specific provision. We need a plan for the 136,000. And a national strategy could do this and so much more besides. Behind the headline figures and the policies, human stories of desperation and frustration exist. Stories of untapped potential and young people not being able to fulfil their hopes, dreams and aspirations. I've witnessed firsthand the fantastic work local charities like the Whitechapel Centre do in Liverpool, the likes of Mustard Tree in Manchester and the New Horizon Youth Centre in North London. New Horizon's Chief Executive, Phil Kerry, and Head of Policy, Polly, and their whole team told me the story of Zephyr. At 20 years old, university student Zephyr suddenly had to leave his family home in East London after a family breakdown last summer. He had nowhere else to go, so he spent over a week on the streets of London, which he says was awful. He struggled to find food, so spent much of the week starving. During this time, Zephyr came across New Horizon Youth Centre, outreach workers who invited him into the day centre where he received food and was able to shower. He was given emergency accommodation for a week. After at least 3 weeks of waiting, he was accepted into a medium-stay hostel where he was able to volunteer. Being off the streets and in stable accommodation allowed Zephyr to focus on his future. However, he was developing severe issues with his mental health due to being homeless and his financial situation, and so had to drop out of university. Through mental health support, jobs, education and training support from New Horizons, he is now in full-time employment as a support assistant for a housing association in London. He's still staying in hostel accommodation, waiting until he can afford a room of his own in the private rented sector. Zephyr's dream is to become a youth worker to help other young people in situations like his own. There are at least 136,000 more stories like Zephyr. And for every Zephyr, there is another one like him that may not have a New Horizon Youth Centre to support them. Never mind the economic cost. If you fail to get angry when contemplating the potential waste of human potential through youth homelessness, I would argue that you are simply not human. Zephyr needs hope, but more importantly, He deserves a future. Surely that's why we all enter politics. Austerity economics, the cost of living crisis, low wages and a housing crisis that is out of control has led us to this place. All our young people are struggling across the board, but if you're a care leaver or if you can't access mental health support, have suffered from a family breakdown, have untold trauma, and then fall on the wrong side of a homeless emergency, who will then speak up for you? The third sector do an absolutely amazing job, but we cannot absolve our responsibilities in this place and across Whitehall. That has been going on for far too long. The state has a much more active role to play. It therefore falls to all of us in this place to speak up for our young people who experience homelessness and, crucially, make change happen. I hope the Minister can agree today to changing the way data is collected and commit to implementing a youth homelessness strategy. Additionally, I would very much welcome the Minister committing to look at removing elements relating to homelessness from the Criminal Justice Bill, which I have consistently raised in this place. Thank you.
Adam Holloway.
Thank you. I was going to make a proper speech, but as you may notice, I have a small problem today, so I shall be very brief and just make two observations. But I'd like to thank my honourable friend, the member for Liverpool Wavertree, for getting this debate. My first observation, when the honourable lady talks about building more homes, is that we need to start being honest. One of the reasons, the significant reason we have a housing shortage in this country is because of net immigration. Last year, we took just under 700,000 new people and built just under 150,000 new homes. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to realise that that is absolutely going to drive things in the wrong direction for the sort of people that my honourable friend was talking about. My second observation, I believe I'm the only person in Parliament who spent a significant amount of time living homeless on the streets of various cities in this country and overseas. I think in total I spent about 5 months, including about 4 months on the streets of London for television documentaries where I played the part without cheating. And a big observation from that time is that the overwhelming majority of young people who are on the streets of Britain, cities, and indeed those of the United States and so many other places in Europe, is drug addiction. And until we start to treat drug addicts as people who are primarily unwell and only secondly committing criminal acts, then we will get nowhere with this problem. So we've got to, particularly for young people, but across the board, we've got to move the amounts of money, the amounts of effort, the amounts of rhetoric we put in to the criminal justice system to deal with drug addicts who are sick people, and we need to divert that into the health system. Until we do that, we will continue to have relatively large numbers of sick young people living rough on the streets of our cities. Thank you.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, James Siobhan. Can I say what a pleasure it is to speak in this debate? First of all, can I thank the Honourable Lady for Liverpool Wavertree for leading the debate and for illustrating it so very well with the story of Zephyr. I think that tells a story. Nothing better that tells a story than an example, and that's an example. But it's also an example of what was able to be done to help that person in a way that he has accommodation, he has a job to go to, and he wishes to be a counsellor and help others as well. What that tells me is if the effort is made, then the change can be made. And I think the Honourable Lady deserves to be congratulated for that. And all those groups and charities as well who worked alongside to ensure that Zephyr and others can have a better life. It's also a pleasure to follow the Honourable Gentleman for Gravesham. Thank him for his interest, his observations, his focus, and ultimately his 2 suggestions and recommendations, which I think should be encouraged for government to support. I'm going to give an ordinary example to these things. I always do, Madam Chair. I think it's important that we have a perspective from across all of the United Kingdom. It adds to the debate, but it also shows that what happens here is not solely an issue for here, but it's solely for an issue for elsewhere as well. So homelessness across the UK has become such a major issue, and especially amongst our young people. There is a real opportunity, I believe, for early intervention. Honourable Lydia is saying for Liverpool Wavertree, referred to the early intervention, for us to ensure that our young people, our future, have the means to get the best start possible in life. So it's great to be here to talk about it and the field experiences of other constituencies. A Place to Call Home was a report produced by Queen's University on behalf of the Northern Ireland Commission for Children and Young People, including interviews with some 32 participants across 3 main strands. This homeless report showed that the basic minimum is not being met to support children and young people in Northern Ireland. I know it's not the Minister's responsibility, but I want to give a flavour of where we are. And now we've got a working assembly back and up and working again. The responsibility will fall on the shoulders of the Minister there at the Northern Ireland Assembly to action or have an action plan to address this issue. One issue that's become prevalent back home is the amount of young people and families that are in temporary accommodation within the Northern Ireland Executive, as they simply have nowhere to go. This is, without doubt, Madam Chair, a form of homelessness, and the figures speak for themselves and can't be ignored. In January, February, June 22, households and families accepted as homeless in Northern Ireland included 3,495 children. Furthermore, in July 2022, 3,913 children aged under 18 were living in temporary accommodation in Northern Ireland, an increase from 2,433 in January 2019. Massive increase, shows the size of the problem, and I believe illustrates that this issue isn't just one for here, it's one for all its great United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. This includes children living with their families and young people aged 16 to 17 living independently. A direct impact of young people not having a decent place to live as a knock-on effect on other aspects of their lives, such as poor health and well-being. The Honourable Lady for Liverpool Wavertree referred to this effort and how his anxiety issues rose as a result of what happened, and depression and mental health then took its knock-on as well. We also have to be aware of the well-being outcomes, and that's all part of where we look, and the inability for children to learn at school and beyond. And if you're focusing on your health issues, focusing on how you feel mentally and physically, then it's quite difficult to have a positive focus for the future. It's worth noting, Madam Chair, that there is a major problem in Northern Ireland with hidden homelessness in our youth, where they are sleeping rough or sofa surfing with friends or family. That's something that I probably interact with every week in my office through my staff and through myself, where people are depending on the goodwill of family members, or more often it's really friends, and they're either living in their cars, they're sleeping on the benches, or they're sofa surfing. The Simon community in Northern Ireland are instrumental in supporting young people in terms of accommodation. They have youth accommodation projects that are designed for young people aged 16 to 25 to assist in their transition towards independent childhood, even recognising just how difficult that is. These projects provide a nurturing environment where young people can flourish. So I would give some credit to the Simon community in Northern Ireland for what they do and how they try to address these issues as well. I know that the Honourable Lady is, and her introduction would emphasise that for me and for everyone here, is so sympathetic to this cause. And through her role as Shadow Minister for Housing, I understand that she had some interest in that, has done fantastic work on this issue. Data from the Department of Levelling Up Housing and Community shows that 54% of homeless people reported experiencing homelessness for the first time when under the age of 25. And this debate is so important because it focuses upon a group of young people who we hope to have an opportunity for the future, have the jobs, accommodation and relationships that can help them build for the society that we live in. 48% of those people experience rough sleeping for the first time before the age of 25, and the impact of youth homelessness crisis can be seen across all society. Until the root causes of youth homelessness are addressed, this crisis will continue to escalate. So to conclude, Madam Chair, and ever mindful of the importance of this debate, there are solutions, and I want to suggest two, if I can, which I think will be helpful. We're here not just to raise awareness about the matter, but we're here to give suggestions as well. And within those suggestions that the Honourable Lady has given, and others in this chamber will give after myself, we look to our Minister to ensure that we can get positive responses. So what do we do? Firstly, first and foremost, by ensuring that there's an early identification programme to ensure that those in schools, as early as that, at risk are identified and supported. So I think the Minister, I suggest very respectfully, needs to coordinate our campaign and our issues along with the Education Department to ensure that those who are showing signs or have problems at home and may end up homeless in the street are identified and supported. And secondly, furthermore, by having more affordable, youth-friendly accommodation, the very accommodation that the Honourable Lady for Liverpool Wavertree referred to, the ones that saved young Zephyr and saved many, many others, and probably will in the future, Madam Chair, save many more lives, but they need help to make that happen. So we need to have a focus upon the more affordable, youth-friendly accommodation that we can expect young people to afford to live in. And let's be honest, Honourable Lady outlined the issues. You're trying to study for your exams, your money issues are piling up around you, and you're just wondering, where am I going to go next? So these things compound you very, very, very much. We've all seen some of the extortionate prices people are paying for rent. It's completely unrealistic to expect a young person to be able to pay that, especially in London when you see what the figures are. So I do this respectfully and honestly, look to the Minister for solutions. And whilst there is an understanding of the situation, I believe it is so important that we now take the appropriate steps to support our young people. And as the Honourable Lady says, to address the issue of youth homelessness. It's a blight in society, Madam Chair. It needs to be addressed. I look to the Minister to give us those solutions. Thank you.
Call the Shadow Minister.
Thank you, Dame McDonough, and it's a pleasure to once again serve under your chairmanship. And I speak not only as the Shadow Minister responding to this debate on youth homelessness, but also as a former connections manager, and a job of mine with a team was to get people into education, training, work and housing. I do pay tribute, like other honourable members in the chamber, to my good friend and colleague, the Honourable Member for Liverpool Wavertree, in terms of securing this important debate. And as former Shadow Minister and joint chair of the all-parliamentary group, there's a genuine passion there, which I'm sure has been echoed in the chamber quite eloquently in terms of that powerful speech from my good colleague. And she's determined, as am I and many others, to actually provide the homes and the support, the housing that young people need. Yesterday, as was referenced by my honourable friend, this government broke even more records on homelessness. Despite bold promises to end the most visible form of homelessness, that being rough sleeping, by the end of this year. In reality, rough sleeping, which affects many young people up and down the country, rose 27% last year. That's more than double the number of people recorded rough sleeping. If we go back to 2010, when records began. So the current approach, despite a considerable amount of money, I think the government, the Minister will reference, I think probably around £2.3 billion, it's simply not working. It's broken. It's there for all too many people to see, whether it's a visible form of homelessness, be the streets of London, Bristol, Manchester, Birmingham, and so forth, or the people that many of us know that come to our surgeries that are sofa surfing and living in temporary accommodation. So I will put a question to the Minister now to respond to in a not too distant future. Is the Minister confident that the government is going to deliver on that target of ending rough sleeping by the end of 2024? And what's not working? It would be useful, I hope, for me in a not too distant future. I will give way.
I mean, I'd make the observation for street homeless people who are drug addicted. Part of the problem is that if you need to beg a couple of £100 a day in order to feed your addiction, the answer is not for you to be accommodated somewhere in, say, South London. You need to be at a main station, or you need to be in a capital city in order to get the money to pay for the drugs, which is a real conundrum, I think you'll agree.
I don't disagree with the honourable member. In fact, I met with Baroness Casey very recently, and she again spoke. She'd worked across governments of all political colours and repeated exactly that argument. I agree 100%. As referenced again by my honourable friend, the honourable member for Wavertree, another record was broken yesterday. 112,660 families are now living in very costly temporary accommodation. These are around £1.8 billion a year, a 12.1% increase since last year. And shamefully, we now have 145,800 children living in temporary accommodation. And I do want to pay credit to the Chair, Dame MacDonald, for all the work that you've consistently done and will continue to do and champion the cause. Youth homelessness, of course, is also up. 136,000 young people presenting themselves as homeless to local councils. Previously, that figure was 129%. It's a 5% rise. And of course, that's just the tip of the iceberg. We look at sofa surfing and temporary accommodation, bed and breakfast and sleeping in friends' houses on a temporary basis, and so on. And as my honourable friend said in a speech, young people are often overlooked in the homelessness emergency and do get a raw deal from a system that's often overstretched, uninformed, require training, and a point echoed certainly by members across this chamber today. Research by Centrepoint suggests that 67% of young people were not prevented from becoming homeless by local councils last year. And I'm keen to hear the Minister's response as to how she will ensure that local authorities, councils up and down the country actually respond to their obligation in terms of the Housing and Reduction Act. Dame MacDonald, as a Wythenshawe lad, I was pleased to see the reference by my honourable friend to Lord Morris of Manchester, who was previously the MP for Wythenshawe. But she's right. I mean, almost 40 years on, in his speech on youth homelessness in 1985, the year I left school, by the way, 1985, despite previous innovations by the last Labour government, which is some 14 years ago, very little has changed. We still have a government lacking the political leadership, operating in silos, providing insufficient support, and certainly not building the houses, the genuine affordable homes that people need. Now, I came into politics because I genuinely want a socially just society, and ending all forms of homelessness must be a driving goal of any future Labour minister or Labour government. And I commend the great work of all the charities that are here today at Centrepoint, New Horizons and DePaul, and the 100 youth organisations that came together and have called for a national youth homeless plan for the 136,000 people. So, Dame MacDonald, let me outline what Labour's approach will be. It will have 4 overarching pillars. Number 1, upstream and informed. 2, political leadership, which is cross-departmental. 3, supply of genuinely affordable housing and supported housing for young people. 4, providing a helping hand. Before I map out these pillars, an immediate intervention is required on Section 21, no-fault evictions. And sadly, since 2019, we've seen nearly 80,000 households put at risk of homelessness. Many of them, far too many of them, young people. So no more kicking the can down the road with the narrative of the court's reform. A Labour administration will end no-fault evictions for good. They will be abolished. So now let me outline in turn the pillars. So number 1, upstream and informed. With youth homelessness, we need to get upstream of all the problems. All too often, young people become homeless as they pass between institutions and fall to many glaring cracks in the system. So early intervention and identification will be required in schools and colleges with better support for children, parents and carers. I find this actually quite annoying and irritating in a way. As I was a previous connections manager, I had staff that used to do exactly that until the coalition government abolished connections. So we can actually learn from some of the good things in the past. Data collection, as referenced certainly by my honourable friend, I know it's a clarion call for the 100 or so organisations, should be strengthened and not reliant on freedom of information requests. And again, and that could be a simple change to the HRA, the Homeless Reduction Act, as pointed out by my honourable friend. As referenced by the honourable member for Strangford, said, for individuals at the heart of the homelessness emergency, trauma, mental health, is often at the core of their story. And homelessness could be prevented and ended for good if we had person-centred psychological support, which I know Centrepoint and other charities do provide, but we need to hardwire that into the system. So trauma-informed care must be part of a successful strategy, and I know that will be somewhat pleasing to my good friend. Political leadership and ending the silos. Well, we've got to stop government departments operating in silos. I think it was referenced that the previous minister had an attempt there. But let's look at when we've had some success. I referenced earlier Dame Louise Casey, who I met with again very recently, where we had a drive, created a rough sleepers unit, which was cross-departmental, sat in the cabinet office, and drove that forward. We saw a real reduction in rough sleeping and the use of temporary housing 14 years ago under Labour government. So we can certainly learn from that, but working in the context of a new landscape with metro mayors, so devolved administrations, and obviously across the UK as well. And of course, at the heart, so this will be strand 3, pillar 3, we'll be building more genuinely affordable homes. So social homes, council homes, housing which is youth specific with the appropriate stock. So supply is key. I mean, we stated as a future Labour administration will build 1.5 million homes over 5 years. And a fundamental part of the mix there has got to be genuine affordable homes. That's homes for social rent. And we'll do so to a scale we haven't seen in generations in this country. If we look at the government figures, I think last year it was 9,500 homes for social rent. 9,500. We've got 1.3 million people that are on the housing need register. If you take into account those that were bought through right to buy and demolitions, it's minus 14,000 every year since 2010. The system's broken. We've got to build the houses, and Labour have got to get Britain building again for all people, but particularly young people. And finally, the fourth pillar is providing a helping hand. So, the Labour Party is the party of work. labour. That's what it means. You know, we was set up by certainly the trade unions and the labour movement and actually provide good, secure work. The system at the moment, as it stands, and social security system actually penalises people, particularly young people living independently, to get on with a job, education and training. That's got to change. And I know my colleagues in the shadow DWP team are determined to do that. So it's good, secure work and actually dealing with some of the systematic issues, and I think some were referenced there in terms of care leavers, around council tax and so forth, and to provide a hand up to ensure that people can actually stay in the homes and move into other homes. In conclusion, to end youth homelessness, it's not just a moral imperative. I think it's stated by my good colleague. The cost is, it's over £27,000 per individual at the moment, £8.5 billion. But it's more important than that, isn't it? It's about young people's hopes, young people's dreams, young people's future. And I hope, in the future, as a minister, I can do my bit to provide those hope, houses and opportunities. Thank you.
Minister.
Thank you, Dame Siobhan, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the House for assembling here to debate this very important topic of youth homelessness. And I would also like to thank those in the public gallery who have come into Parliament today. Firstly, thanks to the Honourable Member for Liverpool Wavertree, whom I know well since she was my shadow minister, and thank you for your thoughtful contribution. I will address your big picture points on data and youth homelessness strategy. But if you would allow, or if the chair would allow me, I will just take a few of the very specific questions that I have been asked initially. I'd like to thank the Honourable Member for Gravesham for his powerful and brief contribution. Well done that he was able to do so with a struggling voice. And I completely agree with him that alcohol and drug addiction are clearly very significant drivers of homelessness. That is why government is investing over the 3-year spending review period, £186.5 million. And we actually allocated £15 million as part of the cross-government drug strategy. So I completely agree that homelessness is very complex, but addiction is clearly part of that. And I want to reassure the Honourable Member for Gravesham that I work incredibly closely with colleagues in the Health Department. And that actually, and I'd also like to thank the Honourable Member for Strangford for his contribution. In particular, I would like to thank him for participating, since obviously housing is devolved in Northern Ireland, and he raised some powerful points. However, that does bring me on to the suggestion that government is not working in a cross-government way and is siloed. Slightly ironic, because this morning I actually chaired the cross-government rough sleeping board, where we had the senior officials for every relevant department as part of that board. And so I want to assure the House that there is an awful lot of cross-government working happening, and that is critical.
Very generous. May I just ask, obviously you spoke about chairing the cross-government rough sleeping board, which is wonderful to hear. I just wondered whether or not you had posed the question, given that this board exists, why is it failing? Why are the numbers consistently going up?
Well, if we look at rough sleeping has ticked up over the course of the last year. I would, however, say that it is still down from the pre-pandemic numbers, and it is down from the peaks that we saw in 2017. Clearly, every single person rough sleeping is one too many. We do have specific issues, in particular in London, with rough sleepers who have no recourse to public funds. We do encourage support for those, but that is a very entrenched issue. But government is working to address any new flow of rough sleepers, and I want to give you a few examples of that. So we have been working incredibly closely with the Ministry of Justice in order to address those leaving prison. Now, sometimes the solutions are actually relatively simple, such as not releasing someone from prison on a Friday when there isn't local authority support over the weekend. But I was very happy to hear that prison leavers, the number who are rough sleeping, has gone down by 1/3. Clearly, there is still work to be done. I've also worked incredibly closely with my colleagues in the health department to ensure that people are not released from hospital onto the streets. So in the winter time, we formulated new guidance on that for all hospitals. And what we have also done is that we made exceptional money available, and we suggested that one of the uses of that exceptional money could be on hospital discharge. I work incredibly closely with my colleagues in the Department of Education. The Honourable Member quite rightly referred to care leavers, rough sleeping, and I will go on to talk about that in more depth. We also work very, very closely with the Home Office. This has clearly come up in the Chamber in the past, that as we have a lot of people having successful asylum claims, that they will leave Home Office accommodation, and in some instances, they will go to their local authority for support. And clearly, we have seen an uptick in asylum seekers, successful asylum seekers. I also want to address a specific point on building more homes. I could not agree more that we need to build more homes, and this government is on track to achieve its manifesto commitment of 1 million homes during the life of this Parliament. We have a target of 300,000 homes per year going forward. But I did think it was a bit rich when my opposite number said that the Labour Party would be better at delivering more homes, when London, under the Labour Mayor of London, is the worst performing region for housing delivery, and it has required intervention from the Secretary of State. But let me go on to the substance. Yes, absolutely.
Giving way on that point. Look, the last year of the Labour government built 30,000 homes for social rent. The reference was made to a million homes. Now, not referring to a nice company as it is, the Red Rose or the Morris Homes and so forth, the 4- and 5-bedroom homes which are beyond the reach of young people here. We're talking homes for social rent. And actually, Sadiq Khan, and I know many people will be voting for Sadiq tomorrow, and rightfully so, has got very ambitious plans to build 40,000 council homes going forward. And people will give him, I'm quite confident, a strong mandate tomorrow.
Well, we will see what the electorate decides tomorrow. But one thing is very clear, is that in 2022, London was the worst performing region for housing delivery. West Midlands was number one. But let me go on to the substance of my speech. We can all agree that every young person, no matter where in the country they live, no matter what their personal circumstances may be, deserves a roof over their head and a safe place to call home. Young people are the future of this country. They will help shape the Britain of tomorrow, which is why this government is committed to delivering the safe, warm, decent and affordable housing that every young person needs, providing the solid, stable foundation to get on in life and achieve their potential. We are committed to tackling all forms of homelessness, and we are investing £2.4 billion over 3 years to help achieve this. Very importantly, of that £2.4 billion, £1.2 billion is for the homelessness prevention grant, and this is critical. We need to prevent homelessness before it occurs in the first instance. So this money, this £1.2 billion, can be used flexibly by local authorities to offer financial support for people to find a new home, to work with landlords to prevent evictions, or to provide temporary accommodation. And I do want to say one thing on temporary accommodation. Clearly, we all want people to be in settled accommodation, but temporary accommodation is an important step to get a roof over people's head, making sure that young people are given the support that they need to prevent or relieve their homelessness. Now, I think someone posed the rhetorical question, what has this government done to help young people and their homelessness? And I would say that it is a very, very meaningful thing that we passed the Homelessness Reduction Act. It was a private member's bill which government supported in 2018. This has been revolutionary in our approach to youth homelessness, because what it means, this act, is that local authorities have a duty to assess, to prevent and relieve homelessness across the board, and not only for those who are vulnerable. We have helped more than 740,000 households from being homeless, courtesy of this act, and it has been revolutionary. But I must say, we have come an awfully long way with this act, but we are not blind to the challenges we continue to face. The Honourable Member from Liverpool, Wavertree, asked me about a cross-department strategy to end youth homelessness. And we recognise that young people experiencing homelessness are confronted by particular challenges in accessing and maintaining accommodation. But a strategy is very important, and that is why this government published the landmark strategy in 2022 called Ending Rough Sleeping for Good, which prioritises prevention. Now, I'm often asked, can you ever end rough sleeping for good? And what I would say is that we defined ending rough sleeping as it should be prevented whenever possible. But if it cannot be prevented, it should be rare, brief, and non-recurrent. And to the Honourable Lady's point on data, I agree with you that data is incredibly important. That's why we are working with the Centre for Homelessness Impact. They have a huge data project going on where they are monitoring us and local authorities against these targets? Have you got rough sleeping, rare, brief, and non-recurrent? I have also sat down with the chief statistician and talked to him about the importance of data in homelessness, because it's only when we know what the problem is, where the problem is, that we can address that. And coming out of our Ending Rough Sleeping for Good strategy, a key part of that was the single homelessness accommodation programme. That is worth 200 million in this spending review. We have committed to more spending in the next spending review. And that is providing up to 2,000 homes for people sleeping rough or at risk of sleeping rough. And it is targeted at young people and those with complex needs. And at least 650 of these homes are reserved specifically for young people. I'm delighted to say that with this funding, the City of Liverpool will receive over 2 million of this funding, delivering 20 homes for single homeless young people to help them live independently. Our Rough Sleeping initiative in 2024 targets 2.5 million of funding at youth-specific services in 8 local authorities across England. This funding provides specialist support for young people, such as outreach workers, prevention officers, and specialist housing for those under 25. Now, we talked about councils being required to carry out their statutory duties, and I want to make very, very clear that councils are required to implement the Homelessness Reduction Act, which puts prevention at the heart of the local authority's response to homelessness. If there is reason to believe that an individual or household may be homeless or threatened with homelessness within 56 days, the housing authority must carry out an assessment to determine if this is the case. Of all households assessed for homelessness, 89% were owed a prevention or relief duty. And we have talked about the hidden homeless, which is very important. And I would just encourage anyone who is hidden homeless to contact their local authority. Our specialist youth homelessness advisors work closely with housing and children's services across the country, providing advice, support, and challenge to local authorities to help improve the delivery of homelessness services and to support compliance with their statutory duties. Now, we also discussed the difference in government data to that presented by Centrepoint's data bank research. And I want to say, first of all, that I am tremendously grateful for all the work that the voluntary and charitable sector does in this space. I've had the privilege of doing so many government visits to charities. I went to visit Centrepoint in Wandsworth about a year ago, actually, and I have always been so impressed by everything that is done by the voluntary sector, and they are an integral part of supporting our homelessness efforts. Just last week, I went to visit a youth homelessness house in my own constituency, which was run by SAHA, the Salvation Army Housing Association, Dashwood House. And that was for 18 to 25-year-old women. And I must say, I was just incredibly impressed with the service that they were providing and the move-on support they were offering. And it was wonderful that a lot of people who had lived in Dashwood House but who are now moved on to their own settled accommodation, came back to visit that day. So I'm very grateful to organisations for all of their research and work to support youth homelessness. Just to explain the difference in numbers, government numbers are official statistics. They are very, very closely verified and accredited by the Office of National Statistics. But one of the reasons for the differential is that the Centrepoint data includes all initial inquiries to a local authority. The government reports on the total number of homelessness assessments and the numbers of young people owed a homelessness prevention or relief duty. So I just want to clear up the reason why the numbers are different, and the government numbers form part of the official statistics, and they follow very robust statistical methodologies. The most recent homelessness statistics published yesterday shows, and clearly I regret the uptick in homelessness. This is very serious. Government is doing everything to address this, but it does show that over 17,000 households had their homelessness prevented in the fourth quarter of 2023, and almost 50,000 homeless households were supported to secure accommodation in that same period. This shows that local authorities continue to work hard to prevent and relieve homelessness for all households, including young people. I want to touch on care leavers because I do think this is a very important point, and thanks to the Honourable Lady for raising it. We know that young people leaving local authority care can be especially vulnerable, which is why, through our strategy on children's social care reform, Stable Homes Built on Love, we are working to increase the number of care leavers living in safe, suitable accommodation and to reduce the rate of homelessness amongst this vulnerable group. To achieve this, the government is providing the following money: nearly 100 million for local authorities to increase the number of care leavers that stay living with their foster families up to the age of 21, 53 million to increase the number of young people leaving residential care who receive practical help with move-on accommodation, including support from a key worker. That practical help is very important. And 9.6 million over 3 years to provide extra support to care leavers at the highest risk of rough sleeping. And the Honourable Lady, let me come back to that, asked me about social housing priority need for care leavers. So care leavers have priority need up to the age of 20. I know that she suggested it should be up to the age of 25, but I just want to be clear that once care leavers reach 21, they will continue to have priority need if they are vulnerable because of having been looked after. So that will continue. In terms of wider housing support, at the autumn statement, the Chancellor announced we would restore the local housing allowance rate up to the 30th percentile. This was very, very important. This took effect in April. This will mean 1.6 million low-income households will be on average £800 a year better off, and make it more affordable for young people on benefits to rent properties in the private sector. Around 1 in 10 16 to 24-year-olds currently live in the private rented sector, and that's one of the reasons why the Renters Reform Bill, which passed its third reading last week, is so important. We have talked about building more homes. I think the entire House would agree that building more homes is critically important. We have the Affordable Homes Programme. This is £11.5 billion providing new properties for rent, for low-cost home ownership and specialist and supported housing. And as I have said, we are on track to deliver our manifesto commitment of 1 million new homes within this Parliament. So I would like to conclude today by thanking the Honourable Member once again for securing this very thought-provoking debate. I admire your determination to tackle the causes and impacts of homelessness, particularly for young people today. This is a determination which I and government share. And I hope I have underlined the scale, depth and diversity of the investment this government is making to address this challenge. We know that as a government, we cannot solve this issue alone, which is why we value so much the support and commitment of local government and charitable partners, and of great advocates for the homelessness sector across the House, including the member for Gravesham and Strangford. So thank you again, and let us keep on working towards our shared goal of ending rough sleeping and tackling youth homelessness.
To wind up.
Thank you, Dame Siobhan. I'd like to take the opportunity to thank all honourable and right honourable members for taking part in today's important debate. I'd like to thank the member for Gravesham for his contribution, delivered with his usual aplomb, even if he was quite croaky today. We do disagree on the issues around net immigration and those factors. We have served on the Home Affairs Select Committee together. I would suggest that the immigration problems is part of a wider issue around the government not getting to grips with the backlog and also the money that they're spending on hotels, which is significant. But I'm sure that we will have this debate outside this place when he has his voice back in full flow. In respect of his time as a journalist when he was on the streets and he spoke about drug addiction in his usual knowledgeable fashion, I completely agree that we have to do more to support people with drug and alcohol addiction. And for me, that starts with trauma-informed services. I would like to say that they should be mandatory trauma-informed and trauma-led services, and that's a challenge that I pose to my good friend on the front bench if we are lucky enough to form a government at the next election. For the member for Strangford, who sadly is not in his place at present, he delivered his contribution with his usual knowledge and compassion, and it was very interesting to hear about his contributions in Northern Ireland. And I know how much this debate means to the sector, who do so much to serve our communities and in particular young people. So once again, thank you all for being here today, and I hope that my colleagues have taken something away from that to the debate. I'd like to thank my honourable friend, the member for Weaver Vale, for his valuable contribution. I know that through our many years of friendship that he understands the issues, and I'm committed to ensuring in the coming months ahead, Dame Siobhan, that he loses the word shadow from his title and we can start to tackle some of the masses head on, hopefully together. I applaud his commitment in increasing housing supply, ending Section 21 evictions and tackling all forms of homelessness, including youth homelessness. And I hope the Shadow DLUC team really consider how we can learn lessons from the last Labour government, when we had practically eradicated homelessness and rough sleeping by the time we left office in 2010. My good friend spoke about Dame Louise Casey, and I know of the marvellous work that she did. And I hope that we can very much learn lessons from that and have a truly cross-departmental strategy going forward. I'd like to extend my thanks to the Minister for her thoughtful contribution and reply today. I totally respect her commitment to these masses. I do feel that she is a member, sadly, of a Tory government that has manifestly failed to deliver on its intention with respect to all forms of homelessness and has been set up to fail in the same way as some of her predecessors have. Homelessness may have been a priority for the government briefly under the stewardship of the Right Honourable Member for Maidenhead, but I believe it's fallen down the agenda since then. And lastly, Dame Siobhan, I would like to really implore honourable members and right honourable members to go away from this debate today and continue talking about youth homelessness. Please talk up the need for a national youth homelessness strategy. Talk up the need and be the voice for those 136,000 young people, because they deserve to have a life well lived, a life where they can fulfil their potential and their dreams, hopes and aspirations to be realised. Thank you.
Yeah. Question is that this House has considered youth homelessness. As many of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it, the ayes have it. Order, order.
Sitting suspended until 4 o'clock.
The sitting suspended until 4 o'clock.